We are 58 days in without a single arrest, or even a suspect named. Digital sleuth Chris McDonough has spent weeks piecing together a documented case, yet those in charge of providing answers have met it with total silence. McDonough insists the events here are vital because any veteran detective will tell you the exact same thing. The initial walkthrough of a crime scene dictates everything. Nail that first step and you have a solid case, but slip up once and you are playing catch-up. Looking at the current state of this probe, he contends that the Nancy Guthrie investigation suffered that exact fate. Since the family handled every bit of evidence first, people are now demanding to know why 58 days signifies much more than just a duration. Regarding kidnappings, official FBI protocols recognize that the chances of finding a victim alive shrink with every passing hour, noting that after 72 hours, the mission shifts from a rescue to something far more grim. 2 months later, the initial rush has faded into a tedious slog through computer logs, genetic banks, and grainy videos from street cameras that might have missed the getaway car entirely. After 2 months, the police often stop talking for long stretches of time. That quietness carries a heavy significance of its own. Sometimes that lack of updates suggests detectives are nearing a breakthrough on a sensitive lead they cannot risk leaking. Other times, it signifies the trail has gone cold and the case is turning into what everyone fears most. Then there is the third possibility currently being highlighted by internet researchers, supported not by gossip, but by a structured, peer-reviewed methodology. It implies the entire probe has followed a path established during those opening hours, and no one has bothered to double-check if that direction was even right. This is the core claim from digital analyst Chris McDonough, known online as True Crime Bab, who has been constructing a comprehensive breakdown of the mystery. While he works as a pro investigator, his official background has not been confirmed by the public. He operates as a web-based researcher, but his observations carry weight because the underlying pattern is undeniable. These facts are baked into the case files and have since been backed up by someone with much more clout than a social media profile. Before diving into the details, let us make one thing perfectly clear. This discussion is not about pointing fingers at the family. On February 16, 2026, Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos put out a formal notice exonerating the whole Guthrie clan, including all the siblings and their partners. His statement left no room for doubt, stating the family has been incredibly helpful and kind, while suffering as victims themselves. To imply anything else is both factually wrong and heartless. He further told KOL that genetic material found in Nancy's house does not belong to her or anyone in her inner circle. The family's innocence is a closed book. What remains wide open, and hasn't been mentioned publicly for 58 days, is the issue of the actual procedure. In a mystery that still lacks an arrest, the protocol followed is the only thing that counts. Let us revisit the night of January 31st, 2026. Nancy Guthrie headed out from her place in the Catalina foothills, north of Tucson at 5:32 that evening. She hopped in an Uber to grab dinner and play games at her daughter Annie's house for a normal Saturday night. The driver who picked her up was later questioned by detectives, a fact Sheriff Nanos confirmed, though the specifics of that conversation were never made public. Nancy enjoyed the night with her relatives, including Annie and her son-in-law Tommaso Cion, before being dropped back at her house between 9:45 and 9:48 p.m. The official police timeline shared with several news outlets says she arrived at 9:48 p.m. The garage door opened and then clicked shut just 2 minutes later. For nearly 14 hours, not a soul realized something was horribly wrong. At 1:47 that morning, the Ring camera on the porch went dark, not due to a glitch, but because a person was standing right there. A different security camera picked up movement at 2:12 a.m. By 2:28 a.m., the connection to Nancy Guthrie's pacemaker, which logs heart stats to her phone, was completely cut. That lost pacemaker signal serves as the most reliable, independent evidence of when the abduction occurred. We are talking about an 84-year-old woman with major physical hurdles. She needed daily heart pills and suffered from such intense back pain that she could barely reach her mailbox on her best days. Suddenly, she was gone without a trace. Her cell phone, handbag, and even her vital medications were all left behind on the counter. At 11:56 the next morning, a close friend noticed she missed their usual Sunday online church service. Concerned by the break in routine, the friend alerted the family. Annie and Cameron Guthrie rushed over to their mother's place. They spent about an hour looking around the house before anyone actually called 911. That emergency call was placed at 12:03 p.m. Pima County deputies pulled up at 12:15, arriving 12 minutes later, which was nearly an hour after the family first stepped inside. That time gap is the very first thing any serious detective would scrutinize because in the world of crime, scene integrity is the bedrock, not just some minor detail. Law enforcement is taught to treat any potential crime scene with the mindset that every moved item, every smudge on a window, or every open door could be the key to the case. They are further instructed to view anyone who entered the area before them as an unpredictable factor that cannot be accounted for or fixed. It makes no difference who those individuals are. It does not even matter if the police are certain they are innocent. Rules exist because once evidence is tainted, it is gone forever. You either protect it immediately or you lose it. In this specific instance, the police were not the first ones on the scene. The family beat them there. When Annie and Cameron showed up that morning and realized things were off, they spotted 3 specific clues that this was no simple health scare. The rear doors to Nancy's place were wide open. There was blood on the front step, and the Ring camera had been ripped right off the house. Savannah Guthrie shared those grim details for the first time during a March 26, 2026 talk with Hoda Kotb on the Today Show, her first public appearance since the ordeal began. She explained how confused the family was at first. They assumed Nancy might have collapsed and that medics had carried her out the back on a gurney. They viewed the entire scene through the lens of a medical accident until they spotted the blood and realized the truth. Ex-FBI agent Jennifer Coffin-Daffer analyzed those open doors and suggested that the kidnappers likely came in through the back and left the doors open as a quick escape route or for backup. Given the new evidence about the propped door, it is highly unlikely Nancy left it that way. She was well aware of local wildlife, which is why she used her Nest camera. But could the intruders have kept it open to let in accomplices? Retired detective Michael Alcazar went even further, noting that an open door usually points to several suspects rather than just one person. These expert opinions rely entirely on Savannah's public account of what her family saw. That is because the only description of those doors comes from that morning. The family reported the state of the house to the deputies, but the police never saw it for themselves. That is the recurring issue. Every single major observation from those vital early hours was colored by the perspectives of the people who got there before the law. Between the doors, the blood, and that missing camera, the environment where each clue surfaced matters. The detectives who arrived at 12:15 p.m. stepped into a space that the relatives had already mentally and physically disturbed. Moving on, let's dive into the kidnapping for cash angle, as this pattern is really where things get interesting. Just hours after reporting Nancy gone, while police were still scanning the house, Savannah reached out to her brother, Cameron. He'd already formed a conclusion. She confirmed this during her March 26th appearance on the Today Show. To use her own words, Cameron was convinced immediately. Even when I called him, he just knew she'd been snatched for money. He just knew. He said, "I'm sure it's a ransom situation," before any letters showed up, before the police gave the case a label, or Nanos even spoke to the press. The family had already decided this was a kidnapping for cash. They pushed that narrative to the authorities from the very start. 2 days after Nancy went missing, on February 3rd, the initial demand arrived. A TV station in Tucson, Cold, got it through their online tip portal. That same day, TMZ also landed a copy. Cold received a second message on February 6th from a different internet address, though it used the same type of masking software. Both letters contained private details about the inside of Nancy Guthrie's place, like the exact spot of her Apple Watch and info about an indoor floodlight. The FBI's lead agent, Keith Janicki, admitted they were treating at least one message as credible since it mentioned specific facts, a timeline, and a cash demand. Harvey Levine from TMZ, who held the first note, found the level of detail quite shocking. The writing is flawless. It's organized and complex. He pointed out the Apple Watch detail as the hook for the FBI, noting it mentioned a location for the device that wasn't exactly obvious. There's one thing the police still haven't cleared up. No one has ever confirmed if those letters were sent by the actual kidnapper or just someone with inside info who wasn't involved. These messages mention things that, at the time, only someone who'd been inside that house would know. Investigators haven't shared a list of who those people might be. On February 7th, Savannah, Annie, and Cameron posted an Instagram video addressed to whoever had their mom. "We got your note and we hear you," Savannah stated. "We're asking you to please give her back. This matters to us more than anything, and we'll pay. We got the message, and we understand. We're begging you to return our mother so we can be a family again. That's the only way we'll find any peace. She's precious to us and we'll pay up." By doing this, the family publicly backed the ransom theory before the police had even made it official. Because the family treated the letters as real and went on camera to acknowledge them, the idea of a ransom kidnapping became the main way everyone, including maybe the cops, viewed the case. Fast forward to March 26th, nearly 2 months later, Savannah told Hoda Kotb she thinks 2 of those notes were legit, while the others were just people looking for a payout. There hasn't been a single press update about those messages since the start of the case. No law enforcement agency has confirmed if any of the notes were from the real culprit. Yet, the ransom story started by the family before the notes even arrived has stayed the focus. Their public reactions and Savannah's first big interview have kept this theory as the case's main point of interest. Former FBI agent Harry Trombitas told Yahoo News that the ransom theory seems less likely as time goes on. "There are too many moving parts." He said there are just too many ways to get caught. Several former feds have pointed out how weird it is that there's been no direct contact, no set channel, no proof she's okay, and notes sent to news outlets instead of the family is very strange for a real kidnapping. Usually, they noted, real kidnappers make their demands fast and direct. The confusion here isn't how these crimes normally go. It's a total outlier. Still, the ransom idea sticks around mostly because the family brought it up first and kept repeating it. If this deep dive is the kind of stuff that keeps you following this story, stick around for the rest of the video. We're heading toward a confirmation that didn't come from the internet, but from a former leader of the Pima County Sheriff's Department. What he revealed about this case flips everything we've talked about on its head. We'll get to that conversation in a moment. First, let's look at how the police officially handled the family early on, because those records matter. On February 16th, the day Nanos officially said the family weren't suspects, he went into detail about how they'd helped the investigation. In an interview with Cold, he mentioned, "We spoke with them. We took their cell phones. We took their computers. We checked everything. We went through their cars. We searched their homes." He added they were completely helpful and were ruled out within days. On February 7th, police did a court-ordered search of Annie Guthrie's place in Arizona, which the department called a standard part of the process. FBI agents walked the neighborhood around Annie's house in mid-February, knocking on doors after that footage of a masked person came out. They even briefly held a man and searched his place in Rio Rico. He was let go without charges and told the public he hoped they'd catch the real guy. That's all basic police work. You start at the middle and work your way out. Tech, cars, homes, and neighbors, the people closest to the victim, are always the first stop. It doesn't mean they're guilty, it's just the protocol. But the big picture coming from that protocol is what's getting attention now. Every part of that investigation happened because the family volunteered their help. They handed over the gear, they let police in, they laid out the scene. They even chose the theory. These figures served as the lead experts on determining if the abductors' messages were genuine. As detectives searched the surrounding streets for leads, the family released a heartfelt plea on March 21st, asking the whole city to help. Check security tapes, personal logs, text messages, or interactions that might now seem vital. This plea fits perfectly with the private information that police officers recently shared with news investigator Brian Anton. There's a long-held belief that whoever did this is a local, maybe even someone from the neighborhood. Is that conclusion based on independent police work, or is it just the family's narrative slowly becoming the official theory? That's the big question that hasn't been answered. But it's not just people on the internet asking it anymore. This investigation took a massive turn in the last 72 hours. On March 27, 2026, Dr. Richard Carmona went on News Nation to talk with Brian Entin. Carmona is not a mere media pundit or some internet analyst. He actually served the nation as the 17th Surgeon General of the United States. He dedicated 30 years to the Pima County Sheriff's Department, including time commanding the tactical unit. He used to head this entire organization. He understands exactly how forensic scenes should be handled in this town. His comments on that broadcast represent the most scathing public critique of the current probe's validity from any high-level expert. Carmona informed the host that the most troubling detail, something he said baffled everyone, was when Sheriff Nanos went on TV to declare he personally unsealed the scene at the Catalina Foothills home. That is simply not a task for a sheriff. Carmona explained that the lead investigator on the ground makes that call once they determine all physical evidence has been documented, bagged, and processed. A sheriff announcing the end of a scene lockdown on live television is completely outside the norm. It violates the professional boundary meant to keep political leadership from interfering with technical forensic work. Nanos then shut the site back down for further work. Carmona viewed that sudden reversal as basically a pointless gesture. Once the perimeter is compromised, the damage is done. He noted that you just cannot fix a tainted crime scene. Carmona did not stop there. He also commented on the viral clips showing a pizza delivery vehicle driving right over Nancy Guthrie's yard while the police were still searching the property. He mentioned that in a legal setting, a defense lawyer could claim the scene was compromised because the authorities allowed delivery people to enter the area. How can anyone trust the evidence now? You simply cannot unring that bell once a crime scene has been messed up. Once a site is contaminated, the whole thing falls apart because the chain of custody was broken, which investigators insist is crucial for finding any proof that might actually be relevant to the ongoing trial. Yet, this lapse came from the top official himself, the sheriff, leaving everyone wondering what he could possibly have been thinking. We were all just stunned by some of the things he said. He then moved past the scene itself to talk about public confidence and the sheriff's own reputation. When a sheriff has to constantly walk back his words or shift his narrative every day, the community stops believing in him. Leadership is impossible without trust. He also mentioned another problem. Nanos allegedly sent evidence to a private lab in Florida to save money instead of using the FBI. Carmona noted that the federal government actually provides those forensic services to local departments at no cost. He claimed it was a budget choice, Carmona said. However, the FBI does not send a bill. Taxpayers are already covering those expenses. Choosing a private lab over the FBI, especially when the Bureau is helping lead the case, creates a legal mess that defense teams use to attack the chain of custody. Whether that was a major blunder or just a paperwork choice, it highlights the lack of consistency that Carmona thinks is destroying public faith in the probe. These critiques did not happen in a vacuum. Carmona's words came after weeks of internal turmoil surrounding Nanos. 6 days ago, on March 24, 2026, the local deputies union, representing over 300 members, voted to demand Nanos step down immediately. These are not outsiders. This is his own staff. Meanwhile, the Arizona Republic reported that Nanos left the El Paso police in 1982, earlier than his resume suggests, to avoid being fired for conduct issues like fighting and gambling. The department blamed a typing error. 3 days ago, the county board voted to force Nanos to testify under oath, using an old state law that might lead to his firing. County Supervisor Matt Hines told the press that Nanos has failed the people who trusted him. For his part, Nanos has dismissed all the hate. He told a local station that he has no regrets about his team's work. He does not think the scene was released too early or any of that. He called the whole thing ridiculous. Whether you find that comforting or terrifying depends on your view of the situation. It is quite something to see a sheriff facing a rebellion from his staff, a legal subpoena, and a public scolding from the former U.S. Surgeon General who once held his job. This is not how a normal investigation works. It is a case falling apart due to internal chaos. And that chaos impacts the quality of the evidence. Now, let's look at the actual forensic data. What do we have that did not come from the victim's relatives? The FBI and Google found video from the doorbell camera at the house. That device had been ripped away. Even though the hardware was ripped from the wall, the recorded clips remained backed up on Google's cloud storage. The video captures a real person standing outside the New York home, a man hiding his identity behind a dark winter mask. He heads toward the entrance, uses a hand to shield the lens, and then piles up some yard brush to make sure the camera cannot see a single thing. He is carrying a black 25-liter hiking bag, a brand that was only sold at Walmart back then. During an interview on March 2nd with NBC, Thanos conceded the bag might not have come straight from a major retailer. questioning if it was perhaps an auction find. Maybe I bought it and posted it on eBay? That is the angle we are exploring. Clad in hand coverings and a winter hood, he sports a weapon holstered strangely near his navel, a detail experts highlight as a unique identifier. Federal tech teams estimate he stands roughly 5'9" to 5'10" with a medium frame. Another photo shared by the Bureau shows him minus both the rucksack and the handgun. Detectives verified that photo was likely snapped on another afternoon, hinting the perpetrator scoped out the residence's entryway several times prior to the night she vanished. Retired murder investigator from Puma County, Kurt Dabb, noted to the press that the intense planning visible on film, specifically the heavy bag and weapon, indicates deep scouting. Robbers never target houses while carrying a full pack. He concluded this was definitely an abduction, not a simple break-in. Officials told CNN they suspect the individual might have been monitoring the estate since way back on January 11th, so detectives are currently urging local residents to review their private security footage from that date through January 31st and early February 1st. Extra recording devices from the residents, including units watching the backyard and the front carport, were seized and analyzed by the police. Based on reports from CBS News, those devices recorded several weeks of video prior to the actual abduction. Relatives, gardeners, and maintenance crews all checked out fine. No signs of that masked figure from the porch camera appeared on those tapes. Detectives are working with a massive paper trail detailing everyone who visited the site, yet no one has been taken into custody yet. All eyes are now on the forensic results. At the start of the probe, a dark glove found about 2 miles from Nancy's residence turned into a major focal point for detectives. It looked just like the pair the intruder wore in the security video, and it carried genetic material from a mystery man. That profile went into the federal database of 19 million known criminals, but the system didn't flag any hits. Consequently, the team turned to forensic genealogy, using the exact method that finally caught the Golden State Killer decades later. However, the latest updates from the Pima County Sheriff's Office reveal that the genetic material on that glove actually belonged to a nearby food service worker with zero ties to the crime. That path is a dead end. Now, the focus shifts back to the biological evidence found inside Nancy's house, a complex sample that doesn't match her or her inner circle. In early March, Nanos explained that the sample likely contains traces from multiple people, making it incredibly tough to pull out one clear profile. Authorities confirmed that their database searches came up empty, though Nanos insists this remains a promising path that requires patience. Currently, that's the status. Nancy's heart device stopped recording at 2:28 in the morning. On the 1st of February, that specific moment was logged by a medical monitor, providing the most reliable forensic evidence available in this entire mystery. It gives the police a likely window for when she was taken and sets a firm timeline for the whole kidnapping. A car was spotted on a neighbor's security camera, roughly 2.5 miles away, at 2:36 that same night. So far, the department hasn't tracked it down, according to Nanos's spring update. They are treating it as just one of hundreds of thousands of vehicles that happened to be on the road during those early hours. This sums up 58 days of police work, a visible but anonymous suspect, unidentified DNA from the scene, a discarded glove lead, and a precise time on a pacemaker. Toss in a mystery car and a sheriff dealing with a mutiny while trying to claim the crime scene wasn't compromised, despite what his old colleague says. This is where the ideas from Chris McDonough stop feeling like internet chatter and start feeling like questions that need real answers. Through several exhaustive write-ups, McDonough posits that the detectives on this case are grappling with a psychological conflict. This isn't about some secret plot or scam. It's a proven mental pattern where the primary lead becomes an echo chamber, blinding officials to any conflicting data. His main point is that the authorities are parroting the relatives' version of events rather than chasing cold facts, especially since they were the initial witnesses. Because they established the original premise and stayed vocal, they steered the probe in directions that have never faced an outside review. Though his background remains murky and he operates as a web commentator, the scholarly foundation of his theory is solid, making it a vital lens for this debate. Back in 2006, Keith Finley and Michael Scott, legal experts from the University of Wisconsin, released a study that skyrocketed to prominence within the country, focusing on legal restructuring. Their work on investigative blind spots was featured in the Wisconsin Law Review and later adopted by global advocacy groups and various international justice departments. Their main point was that this kind of narrow thinking isn't usually caused by bad intentions or laziness. Instead, they showed it's a natural human flaw that hits even the pros, and it becomes deadly in police work because once these calls are made, they can't be undone. These experts describe it as several mental shortcuts hitting at once, like confirmation bias, where you only see what you already think is true. Then there's looking back and thinking you were always right, or judging a choice by its end result, rather than whether it was a smart move at the time. Collectively, such psychological habits force detectives into crafting a story about the events, subsequently screening each fresh discovery via that perspective, highlighting facts which back it up while ignoring anything which fails to fit. The data proves this isn't just a problem for cops on the street. It affects the scientists in the labs too. Experts who were briefed on a theory before inspecting the actual proof often skewed their professional judgment regarding that material to match the initial version of events provided to them from the very start. A major national study in 2009 highlighted this exact same issue across multiple forensic fields. When the Innocence Project looked at over 170 cases cleared by DNA, they found this specific type of mental bias in nearly everyone. It wasn't always the only mistake, but it created a culture where errors and missed clues were allowed to sit for years without being questioned. And there is one specific part of this theory that these professors flagged for cases that are all over the news. When the whole world is watching and the media is breathing down your back, the pressure to stick to the original story becomes almost impossible to fight. The family has a lot of influence. They are grieving and have been the main source of info for the public. Questioning them feels wrong. In a case this big, involving a famous media personality, pushing back against the family story is a huge professional and social risk. The science is clear. When you have a rush to solve a case and an influential early theory, the chances of getting stuck in a loop skyrocket. Look at the facts here. The police didn't get to the Guthrie house until an hour after the family had already been walking through it and moving things. A relative brought up the ransom idea before a note even showed up, and they kept pushing it publicly before the feds could even check the handwriting. The family basically decided which evidence mattered, all while a former sheriff claimed the whole scene was tainted from the jump. They sent evidence to a paid lab in Florida instead of using the free FBI services, and the sheriff went on TV to bypass his own lead detectives. Things got so bad that the actual deputies in the department voted that they had no confidence in their own leader. Local officials are now demanding sworn testimony, and nearly 2 months later, there's no suspect, no cuffs, and no explanation for why this house was picked. What McDana and other experts are pushing for is a complete, outside-the-box look at the case, which is exactly what the law books recommend for big investigations. They need a fresh set of eyes to look at the evidence without being tied to the theories that were cooked up in the first few hours. The goal isn't to point fingers at the family or dispute the forensics, but to ensure that the early storyline, the doors, the blood, the ransom setup was actually put to the test rather than just being validated by the investigators' own biases. That specific approach has a name in academic research. It is now standard policy in countries that have had to deal with the messy fallout of tunnel vision in high-profile criminal cases. The Canadian government endorsed it after a national review of wrongful convictions. The Netherlands even built their entire investigative reform strategy around this very concept. The Innocence Project pushes for this in any case, where public heat and early narrative framing are front and center. Whether this has happened here, or if anyone outside the lead unit has been brought in to challenge the working theory rather than just help build it, has not been confirmed publicly. Here is what has been stated on the record. Sheriff Nanos mentioned to NBC Nightly News back in March of 2026 that while they have a hunch about the motive and the target, he cannot say for sure. He has not dismissed the idea that the same person could strike again. He also noted that certain details are being kept secret to avoid ruining the investigation. Peter Christensen, a defense lawyer in Las Vegas, told Newsweek in early March that the quiet from the team likely indicates a move from public outreach to a more focused consolidation of physical evidence. Usually, when the police say they are zeroing in on a lead, it means they have stopped sorting through tips and started narrowing things down through digital trails and forensic lab work. Former FBI supervisor Lance Leising told CBS News that when veteran agents go silent, It often means they are making progress, though he admitted that every passing day makes the evidence weaker. That might all be accurate. The case could be gaining momentum. There could be a lead they are pulling in the background that the public just hasn't seen yet. But look at the facts we have right now. The initial contact, the crime scene blunders, the scandals surrounding the sheriff, the DNA that hasn't matched anyone, and the suspect who simply vanished. These issues do not exist in isolation. They align with what online sleuths are saying and what a former Puma County sheriff has now backed up regarding the sloppy conditions of the initial search. One more detail from the Day 45 CBS report deserves a mention, because it speaks directly to what law enforcement has actually been able to verify on their own. Sources told CBS that more surveillance video was found at the Tucson home. One camera was aimed at the backyard, while another covered the driveway and the garage area. Those cameras recorded weeks of footage before the kidnapping. Detectives went through all of it, looking at relatives, regular visitors, the lawn crew, and the pool workers. Nothing was flagged as suspicious. Most importantly, the person in the mask from the doorbell camera never showed up on any footage in the weeks leading up to the abduction. This tells investigators that the intruder was disciplined enough to stay away from the front door during the weeks those rear cameras were recording. He knew how to avoid being seen. He either spotted the cameras or was just incredibly careful. This fits with former detective Kurt Dabb's assessment that the house was almost certainly staked out well in advance. If you have been tracking this closely, and this video raised more red flags than it lowered, you already realize why cases like this need an informed audience that refuses to let the silence be the final word. Share your observations in the comments. We are looking for sharp, evidence-based thinking from people who are actually studying the case with discipline, not just guessing. Because 58 days later, with no arrest and a former sheriff calling the crime scene a disaster, the need to keep asking the tough questions has never been more urgent than right now. The case reminds us that truth is fragile, and once mishandled, it may never fully return. In the first hours of any crisis, every second matters, not just for saving a life, but for preserving the truth that might one day deliver justice. When procedures are overlooked, when emotions take control, or when assumptions are made too quickly, the cost is not just a mistake, it's a future filled with unanswered questions. This story also reveals something deeper about human nature. We want answers. We want certainty. But when we cling too tightly to the first explanation that makes sense, we risk blinding ourselves to the truth. Even professionals, trained and experienced, are not immune to this. Bias, pressure, and public expectation can quietly reshape reality. And yet, there is still a lesson in responsibility. Not just for investigators, but for all of us, to question carefully, to think critically, to resist the comfort of easy conclusions, because justice doesn't come from speed, it comes from accuracy. In the end, this isn't just about one case. It's about the importance of doing things right, even when it's hard, even when time is running out. Because once the truth is lost, no amount of time can bring it back.